She just wanted a clean place to take care of a forgotten elderly woman, but she ended up changing the life of the most powerful man at the airport. Hello, my friends and friends. Before starting this amazing story, leave comments from where it's coming from, okay? And remember to like and subscribe to the channel. In New York, between suffocating meetings and dinners that felt more like auctions for influence, Michael Walker, 37, was known as the CEO who never smiled. Owner of Walker Air, one of the largest airlines in the country, Michael had everything money could buy, except time and peace. In recent years, he had transformed his life into an unbreakable schedule, where anything that got out of control was seen as weakness. Ever since he lost his mother to a degenerative disease, he had avoided any kind of emotional connection. He created his own manual for how to deal with life. Goals, metrics, and goals again. That was how he breathed. Even the VIP area at John F. Kennedy International Airport, JFK, which he had personally renovated, functioned more as a silent sanctuary than a waiting room. There, he would hide when he needed to remember that, before all this, he was just Michael, the boy from Queens. That morning, he was checking his emails in the car when he received a direct notification from the terminal manager. An incident of improper use had been recorded on the VIP lounge cameras. A cleaning lady, according to the report, had used the space improperly and remained there for more than an hour, accompanied by an elderly lady. The tone of the email was alarming. The conduct goes against all safety and exclusivity standards of the space, the report said. Michael closed his cell phone with suppressed anger. To him, this was a symbol of everything that was wrong in the country. The informality, the disrespect for rules, the culture of hatinho, and on top of that, in the space he considered the most sacred. I'm going to personally look into this today. Enough of this kind of thing being ignored, he said quietly, more to himself than to the driver. The car changed direction. The CEO was going to solve the problem himself. He walked through the airport corridors with firm steps. He didn't need to announce his presence. When Michael Walker appeared, the employees straightened their posture. He entered the VIP lounge without making a sound. What he saw there disarmed him for a few seconds. Instead of someone lounging in, armchairs with expensive headphones, he found an employee kneeling on the floor next to an elderly woman with loose white hair and a lost look in her eyes. The woman, huddled under a light blanket, was being fed with spoons from a simple styrofoam lunchbox. The employee, of average height with her hair tied in a bun and a clean but worn uniform, spoke sweetly. "Come on, Doña Carol. Just a little longer, okay? You like rice with pumpkin, remember?" The old woman smiled shyly and whispered, "Sí. Mi hija, tú siempre cocinas rico." Michael felt his stomach tighten. This was not what he had expected, and for a moment, he just stood there watching. The employee noticed his presence seconds later. She stood up calmly, without haste or guilt on her face. She wiped her hands on the dish towel and looked up. "Mr. Walker," she said firmly and respectfully, "I knew I was breaking the rules, but she needed a clean, safe place without noise. It was the best I could do with what I had." Michael frowned, trying to keep his posture firm, but there was something in the woman's voice that prevented him from cutting her off like he would with any other employee. "You know this is a restricted area. That's exactly why it's called VIP. Where is the person responsible for her?" The woman took a deep breath. "Abandoned. I found her locked in the house a week ago. Her family went away and left her alone with a caregiver who disappeared. Since then, I've been the one taking care of her. And today I didn't have the courage to leave her alone." And then he added with tears in his eyes, "If you want to fire me, that's fine. But please, let her rest here just a little longer." Michael remained silent for a few seconds. His eyes, always so precise in calculations and decisions, were now confused. The woman in front of him had a name embroidered on her uniform, Isabel, and the way she stood up straight, even in the face of the authority he represented, disconcerted him. The silence between them was broken by a simple gesture. Doña Carol, even though weak, held the hem of Isabel's apron and said softly, as if she were calling someone from her childhood, "Don't leave me, please." That pierced Michael like a cold blade. For an instant he saw his own mother there, in the last months of her life, when lucidity was already slipping away and all that was left was the need to have someone close by. Someone who wouldn't be paid, someone who would just stay. Isabel noticed the subtle change in Michael's gaze, but said nothing. She just knelt down again, taking care of the elderly woman again, while he watched, not knowing what to do with his hands or his own presence. This was completely different from what he had expected to find there. Michael was not used to dealing with this type of situation outside of spreadsheets, and his instinct for control was starting to fail. "Does she have a family?" he asked, now in a less rigid tone. Isabel nodded, but with bitterness in her voice. "Yes, successful children. One lives in Seattle, the other went to Houston. They think paying a caregiver will solve everything. But the caregiver disappeared. They locked her in the house with 2 packages of bread and frozen chicken. They only found out because I heard her screams one morning." Michael felt a twinge in his chest, as if a forgotten part of him was being pulled back. He took a step forward and looked around. The environment, always so impersonal and corporate, seemed smaller at that moment. For the first time, he realized how that room could, in fact, serve something other than just status. Isabel then said, firmly but not aggressively, "I'm not asking you for anything. I just want her to be able to wait in peace while I try to resolve this. The public shelter will take her tomorrow, but there's no space for rest, much less affection." Michael took a deep breath. "You shouldn't carry this alone. And this company, this room, there. Also, my responsibility." After a brief silence, he added, almost as if admitting something reluctantly, "You can leave her here today, and let me know if you need help. I'll see what I can do." Isabel simply nodded, with a look of restrained gratitude. She didn't smile. She didn't take advantage. She simply returned to Doña Carol's side and adjusted the blanket that was beginning to slip from her shoulders. Michael stood there for a few more minutes, watching without interfering. There was something about that woman, the way she cared without expecting anything in return, that challenged him. He, who had spent his life calculating everything, now felt that something inside him no longer obeyed any logic. When he left the room, it wasn't to give orders, it was to think, and for the first time in months when he got into the car, he didn't look at his cell phone. He simply rested his head on the headrest and closed his eyes, feeling a discomfort that wasn't anger or frustration. It was something new, something that hurt, but that finally seemed real. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. The image of the lady calling Isabel "my daughter," the tone of abandonment in her voice, and the determined calm of the employee, all of it came back to him in cycles. It was as if, after years of being numb, something in his chest was awakening. He walked around the penthouse apartment like a stranger in his own home. There were expensive works of art on the walls, a wine cellar, windows, overlooking the city, but everything seemed sterile. No fond memories, no photographs, no living plants. Stopping in front of his mother's old bookshelf, he picked up a forgotten photo frame with an old picture of the two of them. He was still a teenager. She was smiling on a park bench. On the back was a sentence she had written in blue pen. "Never rush others, my son. The best things in life need time." Michael sat down on the couch. For the first time in a long time, he cried silently. The next morning, he returned to the airport before 7 a.m. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't take an entourage. He went straight to the VIP lounge, hoping to find Isabel, or at least some clue as to where they were. To his surprise, she was still there. She was sleeping, sitting up, leaning against the wall next to the armchair, where Carol was resting peacefully. Her clean lunchbox was resting on a folded handkerchief. Michael stood there for a few moments before approaching. When Isabel woke up, she was startled. "Pardon, Signor, I should have left." Michael interrupted her with a gesture. "Did you spend the night here?" She nodded, trying to compose herself. "I couldn't leave her alone. She was agitated. The nurse from the shelter was supposed to come at 8. Michael took a deep breath. "The nurse won't be coming anymore. I've already made a few phone calls. She's going to a better place." Isabel frowned suspiciously. "What do you mean?" Michael sat down in the chair next to her. "I have contacts at a private clinic. Medical care, security, decent food, no sharing a room with 20 other people. She'll be fine." Isabel was silent for a few seconds. Then, for the first time, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to thank you." Michael shook his head. "You don't have to. You were the one who taught me that some things aren't done for recognition. They're done because it's the right thing to do." The silence between them this time was different, filled with a new respect. She lowered her eyes, trying to contain her emotion. Michael then added, "I lost my mother too, and when I saw her yesterday, it was as if she had come back, just for a moment." Michael looked at Isabel seriously, and before she could ask anything, he said calmly, "I got her a place in a clinic specializing in geriatric care. It's in Brooklyn, in a wooded area, with individual rooms and 24-hour medical care." Isabel blinked, unsure if she had understood correctly. Michael continued, "It's not a public shelter. It's a dignified place, where she'll get attention, the right medicine, silence to rest, and people who know how to care. People like you." For a moment, the weight on Isabel's shoulders seemed to lift. She slowly approached the chair where Doña Carol was still sleeping, gently held her hand and whispered, "It's going to be okay, okay." Michael, standing next to her, noticed how that simple gesture carried a tenderness that he himself had not known for years. And when Doña Carol opened her eyes and smiled calmly, it was as if the silent storm of those days finally began to dissipate, not with fanfare, but with care. Michael didn't expect to return to the clinic the next day, but he did, and he also returned the day after that. He told himself it was just to check that everything was going as planned, that it was his duty as the person in charge of the hospital. But the truth is that every time he walked down the white-tiled hallway to room 213, something inside him slowed down. Isabel, on the other hand, was almost always there. She volunteered to help the staff with medication schedules, with Doña Carol's care, and even with other elderly people who were enchanted by her presence. One day, Michael arrived and found her sitting in the garden, reading aloud to Carol, a book of children's stories. "She remembers these stories better," he explained, upon noticing his approach. Michael sat down next to her without asking permission. For the first time, he didn't want to leave. On one of the visits, Michael brought a thermos of coffee with sweet bread. Isabel was surprised. "Did you have breakfast outside of the schedule?" she joked, laughing softly. He returned her laughter with a raised eyebrow. The schedule needed to be revised. The three of them sat on the patio, and Carol was especially lively that day. She told stories of when she used to dance at country dances, of when her husband played the guitar and she sang off-key ranchera songs. Isabel listened attentively, and Michael, too. He noticed that it had been a long time since he had heard someone speak for pleasure, without calculation or intention. After Carol fell asleep, Isabel collected the mugs and said, almost as if blurting out, "It's strange to see you here so often." Michael looked at her, serious but not harsh. "It's strange, but it's not bad." From then on, their meetings became more frequent and less formal. One day, she showed up at Reese's, the clinic, with a cardboard folder full of files. I started organizing the other patients' medications. Everything was a mess. Michael watched her with genuine curiosity. It was the first time someone so far removed from his world seemed to understand what to do with an entire system, even without having a high-ranking position. He asked, "You studied nursing, right?" Isabel nodded. 2 years. I stopped because of my younger sister. Then life got tough. Cleaning was the quickest job I found. Michael listened attentively. And you never thought about going back? She shrugged, with that smile that he was beginning to recognize as a disguise. I thought about it, but thinking doesn't pay the rent. On another late afternoon, Michael invited her to have coffee outside the clinic. Isabel hesitated. She looked at him, then at her watch, then at her own worn-out sneakers. Do you want to go out with me? Michael laughed, almost embarrassed. I want to have coffee with the woman who put my company and my head on straight without even realizing it. She accompanied him to a simple coffee shop near the University District. There, for the first time, they talked about things that didn't involve Carol, work, or obligations. They talked about childhood music and street food. Isabel said she dreamed of opening a soup shop where customers could pay whatever they could. Michael thought the idea was brilliant. You never thought small, did you? She answered naturally. When you come from where I come from, dreaming big is the only luxury you can afford. About 3 weeks after Doña Carol was admitted, the clinic's reception received an international call. It was Ryan Harris, her oldest son, who said he had returned to the United States for family obligations, as he had told the receptionist. The following afternoon, he showed up with his wife, the two dressed as if they were coming straight from a business meeting. They were greeted formally by the management, but they soon seemed in a hurry. Isabel was helping Doña Carol change her clothes when she heard movement in the hallway. As she left the room, she ran into Ryan, who didn't even recognize her. Are you a nurse here? He asked, his cell phone in hand. I'm your mother's neighbor, he replied firmly. I took care of her when she was left alone. Ryan's wife raised her eyebrows. Oh, you're the one who sent us those dramatic audios, right? The way they spoke, coldly and disdainfully, made Isabel's stomach turn. She tried to remain calm. I didn't send drama, I sent the truth. The truth is that she could have died locked in that apartment. Ryan sighed impatiently. Look, we're already working it out. We're going to transfer her to a center in Dallas where we know people. She'll be closer to my wife. Isabel answered without raising her voice. Your mother is fine here. She's safe, cared for, happy. The tension was rising when Michael entered the hallway. He was coming from the administrative wing and had heard part of the conversation. When he saw Isabel standing in front of the two of them, he immediately understood the scenario. He greeted them both coldly. I'm Michael Walker. I'm the one who's covered the costs of Doña Carol's hospitalization up until now. Ryan, surprised, tried to smile diplomatically. We didn't know you were involved. Michael crossed his arms. She was left in a dangerous situation. Isabel found her, saved her, and took care of her. Only after all this did you show up. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. His wife tried to calm things down. It was a misunderstanding. The caregiver had a problem. She didn't tell us. But we're here now, ready to take over. Michael kept his gaze steady. Then prove it. Show that you're here to stay, that this isn't just a formal visit. Isabel, who had been silent until then, looked at Michael with surprise and gratitude. Ryan, visibly irritated, responded with a curt nod. We'll talk to the administration, then we'll decide. And they left without looking back. When the hallway was empty, Michael turned to Isabel. They don't see you, not as a mother, not as a human being. She replied quietly, that's why she calls you Hijo. That night, Michael called his personal attorney and asked him to review all the legal possibilities to protect Doña Carol. I want to make sure that she is only transferred with a medical evaluation and formal authorization from her. The attorney was surprised. Are you personally involved in this case, sir? Michael thought for a second. More than I imagined. The next morning, he took a bouquet of flowers to her room. Carol greeted him with a smile, hugging the arrangement affectionately. I knew my son would come back, she said innocently, thinking she was talking about her blood son. Michael simply squeezed her hand. Isabel watched from the doorway, moved. In that gesture, simple, silent, there was more love and care than Carol had received from her own family in years, and that was what was beginning to change Michael inside. The realization that true bonds are not imposed, they are built. After the harsh visit from Doña Carol's children, something settled in Michael's heart. Until then, he had been acting on impulse, driven by memories, discomfort, and perhaps guilt. But now, seeing how Isabel was treated, he understood that there was an entire structure of silence that made women like her invisible. It wasn't just about that lady. It was about what happened every day, in the hallways of hospitals, behind the scenes of luxury buildings, in homes where an elderly woman with Alzheimer's is locked up because she doesn't fit into the schedule. That night, he spent hours looking at his own company's reports with different eyes. He realized how many things had never been thought of for ordinary people, for rank-and-file employees, for those who don't have important surnames. And he remembered Isabel's words, "I just wanted a safe, clean place for her to wait." It was a simple phrase, but behind it there was a complete lack of rights that no one saw, or pretended not to see. 2 days later, he called an extraordinary board meeting. It was unusual. His partners thought it was a reputational crisis or a merger, but he entered the room with a different kind of urgency on his face. He presented a new project, provisionally named the Human Roots Program. The idea was to transform part of Walker as profits into direct social investment in areas such as humanized care, assistance to the elderly, and training for employees at the operational base. He presented data, maps, and projections, and paused on the last screen. A photo of the VIP lounge. Alone, silent. It was in this space that I realized that comfort cannot be a privilege for a few, that dignity is a decision, and we have too many resources to continue pretending that we can't do anything. The silence in the room was absolute. One of the directors asked, "It was because of that employee, Isabel, right?" Michael looked at him calmly and replied, "No, it was because of me, because I needed someone like her to teach me something I had forgotten, what humanity is." Meanwhile, Isabel went about her daily routine, unaware of anything. She arrived at the clinic early, helped out where she could, and at night she returned home on the same crowded bus as always. She avoided thinking too much about Michael. There was something magnetic about him, yes, but also distant. They were from different worlds, and she knew it. She had never been the type to dream of fairy tales. She dreamed of bills paid, of lighter days, of the right to rest without guilt. Still, sometimes, when she folded Carol's clothes or changed the sheets on her bed, she caught herself thinking about the way he looked at her, and it made her uneasy, not because of the possibility of romance, but because that look seemed to see her whole, without pity, without filter, just seeing her. It was a grey morning when everything began to change. Isabel arrived at the clinic and found the director waiting for her at the door. "Can you come to the office? We have an update." Her stomach tightened. "Did something happen to Doña Carol?" The director smiled. "No, she's fine. But someone sent an official letter requesting your appointment as a humanized care coordinator with full salary and reduced hours." Isabel frowned in confusion. "I'm sorry, but are you serious?" The director simply handed her the envelope. Inside was a sheet of paper with the new contract signed by Michael Walker. At the bottom was a handwritten sentence, "Dignity is not kindness, it's recognition, and you deserve to be seen." Isabel sat up slowly, her eyes filling with tears. For the first time in her life, she felt like someone had actually listened to her. Isabel's appointment as care coordinator, Michael began to see her in a different light, and it wasn't just because of her position. It was because of the way she spoke to the most difficult patients, because of her patience when listening to stories she'd heard dozens of times before, because of the ease with which she walked through the hallways, as if her presence lightened the air. When he showed up at the clinic, the atmosphere seemed to change. Before, everyone would shrink when he walked by. Now a few discreet smiles appeared, and at the center of it all, she was always there. Isabel hadn't changed her manner. She was still simple, focused, direct, but there was something new in her eyes when Michael approached. Something between surprise, gratitude, and care. And he noticed it. He noticed it and let himself be touched, even without knowing exactly how to react. One Saturday morning, Michael showed up unannounced. He was carrying a bag with 2 packed lunches and 2 cans of juice. He found Isabel sitting on the patio, reviewing reports with a pencil in the corner of her mouth. She looked up and frowned. "Did you miss a meeting, Michael?" He laughed. "No, I just thought you might forget to eat lunch again." She tried to hide her smile. "And I brought mango juice. How do you know it's my favorite?" He shrugged. "I have a good memory." They sat together under the shade of a tree and ate slowly, laughing at Doña Carol's random comments, who insisted on calling them mi pareja bonita. After lunch, they sat there in silence, watching. The leaves move in the wind. Michael then said, almost in a whisper, "You know you don't have to prove yourself to anyone, right?" Isabel glanced at him sideways. "And you know you've never tried to listen to anyone before me, right?" They both laughed. But there was something else in that exchange, something that was beginning to reveal itself. Their relationship grew through small gestures. Michael began asking her opinion at meetings about the Human Roots program. Isabel, in turn, began leaving short notes on sticky notes on his monitor when she passed by the company headquarters. "Don't forget to eat today. Visit the clinic tomorrow at 9 a.m. Doña Carol asked about you." To anyone else, they would have been ordinary notes. But to Michael, they were signs of something he couldn't name and perhaps didn't want to rush. It wasn't an explosive passion. It was a patient connection, as if they were both rediscovering what it meant to trust. For real. One day, when he saw her, folding a blanket in Carol's room, he approached her slowly. "Have you always been like this?" She looked at him curiously. "Like what?" He gave her a half smile. "Tough on the outside, but with a heart that feels like it could hold the whole world." Isabel lowered her gaze. "I'm just someone who could never stop. And now, maybe I have a place to stay." That night, Michael came home and didn't turn on his computer. He sat on the couch and opened his mother's old photo album, which he had kept for years. There, among the faded pictures and aged papers, he found a note she had written on his last birthday, before she passed away. "Love, my son, doesn't scream. It plants itself. It grows slowly, and one day, it blooms." Michael closed his eyes and smiled. For the first time, he understood that he was feeling something real, and he didn't need to be afraid. Isabel wasn't part of a project or a moral responsibility. She was someone who had invaded his world without asking permission and, without realizing it, was helping to rebuild it. And that was worth more than any investment he had ever made. On Thursday night, Michael left a white envelope on Isabel's desk at the clinic. It was discreet, without a logo or fanfare. Inside was a handwritten invitation in his firm but slightly shaky handwriting. "I'd like to see you. Not to discuss reports or meetings, just for dinner, just the two of us. If you want, choose the day." Isabel read it over and over again. She held the paper between her fingers, as if it was something too delicate to fold. The next morning, she left a reply written on a piece of recycled paper in a neat, direct handwriting. "Today, at 8 p.m., if it's still just the two of us." Michael found the note and felt something in his chest that he no longer recognized as work anxiety. It was a different kind of urgency, more human, more alive. He spent the entire day feeling slightly nervous. He ordered food from a restaurant he knew she loved, simple, well-seasoned dishes that smelled like real food. He lit candles, put on a soft playlist of old boleros, and spread a blanket on the couch without really knowing why. At 8 p.m. sharp, she rang the doorbell. She was wearing a light burgundy blouse and dark pants, her hair pulled back in a casual bun. She was simple and absolutely beautiful. "You look different," he said with a sincere smile. "I hope better," she replied, stepping inside. "You look different too. You're trying." Dinner went by with an intimacy that seemed ancient. She was moved by his memory of her favorite restaurant. He laughed when she said she hated expensive wine and preferred tamarind juice. They talked about childhood, about losses, about silences. Isabel told her about her father, who disappeared when she was a teenager. Michael told her how helpless he felt in the last days of his mother's life. The two listened to each other with a kind of attention that few experience, the kind that doesn't judge, that just welcomes. After dinner, they sat on the couch with a blanket covering them both. Music played softly. Isabel's eyes wandered over the bookshelf, over the simple objects that now seemed to tell another story. "Do you live alone here?" she asked. "You always have, yes, but today it doesn't seem so empty." The silence between them grew thicker, sweeter, until Michael approached her calmly, gently touching her face. "Can I?" he asked, his voice low. Isabel simply nodded. The kiss that followed was neither hurried nor insecure. It was a kiss full of pause, of relief, of things that had been held back for too long. When they pulled away, Isabel rested her forehead against his and whispered, "I'm afraid." Michael replied with his eyes closed, "Me too, but I'm more afraid of not trying." They stayed there, hugging each other for long minutes. And that night, they didn't sleep alone. They slept together, not by impulse, but by choice. For the first time, they were both exactly where they wanted to be. 2 weeks after dinner, Michael invited Isabel to an intimate ceremony at the airport. The VIP lounge that had been the scene of their first meeting had undergone a subtle but symbolic makeover. The space now featured a discreet panel called Human Space, with real images of employees from the company's base: cleaners, nurses, drivers. In the center, a small plaque in tribute to those who care without being seen, especially Carol Harris and Isabel Miller. Isabel read her neighbor's name there and had to hold back tears. Michael approached and took her hand. "Now she's not just another forgotten face. She's a living memory because of you." During the event, Michael gave a simple speech that surprised everyone present. "For a long time, I confused efficiency with coldness. Today, I understand that real companies only exist when they see people as they are. And if I'm here saying this, it's because an employee from the base showed me that there was still something good inside me." The applause came loudly. Isabel stood in silence at the back of the room, her heart heavy with everything she was feeling. Then, she walked with Michael to the old armchair where Doña Carol had rested weeks before. They sat side by side. He said, almost in a whisper, "I never imagined that loving someone could come like this, so quietly." Isabel squeezed his hand. "I also never imagined being loved without having to ask for it." On the way back, Isabel's cell phone vibrated. It was from the clinic. She answered it, and within seconds her face changed. She turned pale. Michael parked the car immediately. "What happened?" It took her a while to answer. "Doña Carol. She had a respiratory crisis. She's in the ICU." Michael didn't think twice. "Let's go now." They arrived at the clinic at night. The white hallway seemed colder than ever. The medical team explained that her condition had suddenly worsened. Weak lungs, high fever. Isabel couldn't stop crying. She was so well, so well. Michael hugged her tightly. "She's strong. She came all the way here for you, and she knows it." On the other side of the glass, Doña Carol slept, intubated, motionless. The feeling in Isabel's chest was one of helplessness, as if everything was slipping through her fingers. Michael, seeing her like this, didn't know what to say. For the first time, he, the man of solutions, didn't have an answer. They sat side by side on the bench in the hallway, not letting go of each other. Isabel rested her head on his shoulder. "She's my only real family," she whispered. Michael held her hand tightly. "Now you have more people. You have me." And as they stared in silence at that room lit by cold lamps, they both knew that this night was not an end, but a crossing. and that once again all they could do was stay together. The hours after Doña Carol was admitted to the ICU were marked by an uncomfortable silence. The clinic's waiting room, usually bustling with family members and companions, seemed suspended in time. Michael wouldn't let go of Isabel's hand. She paced back and forth, as if moving could prevent something worse from happening. She was fine until yesterday. She was smiling, she repeated softly, like a prayer. Michael tried to be firm, but he had no answers. It was the first time in a long time that he couldn't solve a problem with a phone call or an order. There, all they could do was wait. And waiting hurt. He looked at Isabel and felt a weight he couldn't explain. He wanted to protect her from that pain, but he understood that it was part of her story, and now his too. Early in the morning, a nurse approached. She's conscious, but still very weak. Maybe for a short time. Do you want to see her? Isabel nodded, unable to speak. They entered the room together. The light was low. The sounds of the machines created a constant, almost hypnotic background. Doña Carol was pale, her eyes half closed but awake. When she saw Isabel, she tried to smile. Her voice came out weak but clear. Mi niña, viste. Isabel approached, holding her hand with all the care in the world, as if holding something too precious to break. Of course I came. You've never been alone. Never. Doña Carol squeezed the young woman's hand and with an effort looked at Michael. ¿Y tú también estás aquí? Michael approached the bed slowly. He felt a lump in his throat that he couldn't get rid of. I'm here, Doña Carol. You're very important to us. The old woman smiled slightly and said, almost like a sigh, I never thought I'd live to see someone look at me with so much affection. Isabel cried silently. Doña Carol continued, I'm already tired, you know, but I'm not sad, because I know I left something beautiful in the world, you two. What you have, don't let it go. Isabel squeezed her hand even tighter. You'll get through this. We'll get out of here and eat churros at that place. You like... Doña Carol closed her eyes slowly, without letting go of anyone's hand. She didn't sleep, but she rested, as if that moment were enough for now. They stood there for what seemed like a moment of suspension. Michael looked at Isabel with teary eyes. She's a part of you, and I want to be here for everything, including this. Isabel looked at him tenderly. I know, and that's why it hurts so much. Because now, it's not just her loss anymore, it's life-changing. Michael rested, his forehead against hers. And there, in the cold hospital room, in the middle of the night, it wasn't a kiss that brought them together. It was silence, it was respect, it was the certainty that, no matter how much it hurt, they were exactly where they needed to be. The next morning, Doña Carol felt slightly worse. The doctors said it was to be expected, that she was at her limit, and that her body had been saying goodbye for days, just waiting for the chance to do so with dignity. Isabel spent the next few hours sitting by her bedside, changing compresses, moistening her lips with cotton, telling stories about the neighborhood, about the time when Carol played the accordion in a group of ladies. Michael watched everything closely, in silence, learning to deal with the kind of pain that can't be resolved. It can only be endured. He brought coffee, water, organized the nurses' shift changes, and above all, he never left Isabel alone for a second. Just before noon, Doña Carol opened her eyes wider than she had in the previous hours. She called Isabel in a slurred but conscious voice. Come, here, my little girl. Isabel held her hand with both of hers, kneeling beside the bed. I'm here. I've always been here. The old woman looked deep into her eyes and said, thank you for giving me more time, for giving me love when not even my family knew how to do it anymore. Isabel cried softly. Michael approached and Carol held out her hand to him too. Take care of her. She has so much love stored up. She just needs a safe place to let it blossom. Michael nodded, his eyes brimming with tears. I promise. That was the last time Doña Carol spoke. A few hours later, the monitor in the room beeped one last time. Everything was silent, almost delicate. Isabel rested her head on Carol's chest and cried like a daughter losing a mother. Michael put his hand on her shoulder and stayed there, with her, without saying anything. The nurses left slowly, respecting that moment. It was as if the entire floor of the clinic knew a story was ending, but a much greater memory was being built there. At the wake, held 2 days later in a small neighborhood chapel, there was no luxury, but there were flowers, there were candles, there was affection. Simple people who had known Carol came to say goodbye, and among them, a granddaughter of a neighbor said to Isabel, "She spoke of you as if you were her own daughter." During the burial, Isabel threw a small white rose on the coffin before the earth began to cover everything. Michael stayed by her side the whole time, with his eyes fixed on the ground, holding the pain in silence. When it was all over and the last acquaintances had left, he turned to her and said in a firm and low voice, "If you want, we can continue our lives together, not to forget, but to honor." Isabel, exhausted, sad but whole, replied, "You always said that we became eternal when we became someone's home, and now I am your home and you mine." They embraced there in the empty cemetery while the wind blew gently, as if even the world knew that, in that farewell, something new was born. The days that followed the funeral were silent. Michael respected Isabel's time, even though he was present for everything. He didn't demand anything, he didn't force anything. He just showed up with hot soup, a bag of fruit, and a silent hug. Isabel spent most of her time in the apartment, delicately organizing Carol's belongings, wrapping everything as if packing memories. Each shawl, each old photograph, each notebook with notes from the elderly woman carried more than memories. It carried a story. One late afternoon, when she found an old letter that Carol had started to write but never finished, Isabel cried for hours, and that very day she decided that she no longer wanted to live in mourning. She wanted to live with memories. It was little by little. First she returned to the clinic. Then she resumed her nursing studies. Michael accompanied her from afar, but always close by. One Sunday, they appeared together at a small community event in South Brooklyn, talking about aging with dignity. It was a new project for Michael, but she was the one doing the talking. And when she took the improvised stage with the microphone in her hand, he was sure he was falling more in love with her every day. The care we give to others is a reflection of what we think we deserve. And if today I feel worthy, it's because someone believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself anymore, she said, looking at him discreetly in the audience. Michael smiled and felt his eyes well up. That woman didn't need a stage. She was the stage. Over time, things began to change. Isabel's apartment became too small for the two of them. The idea of living together came up during a simple, unassuming dinner. "I can't stand going back to a place where you're not," Michael said, his mouth full, eating cheese. "Quesadillas," Isabel laughed. "You could have asked more romantically." And he replied, raising his glass of juice, "Do you want to be my official home?" She accepted with a kiss. The new house came soon after. A modest 2-story house with a backyard, large windows, and room to grow. Michael, even though he had the money to buy whatever he wanted, insisted on setting everything up with her, from choosing the curtains to the place where Carol's portrait would go. The photograph was placed in the center of the room, among books, vases, and a small wooden sculpture that Isabel had received from her grandmother. It was the kind of house where care was breathed, where the days began with filtered coffee and ended with soft music and bare feet. Michael continued with his projects, but now he always had a space for her. Isabel taught classes at a community center and coordinated the palliative care wing of the clinic. They lived without rushing, without appearances, without ostentation. And every night, when they lay side by side, there was that same silence that had united them back then. A comfortable silence. A silence of someone who knows that, despite everything, despite the pain, Staying is still the most beautiful gesture of love there is. 3 years have passed since the day Doña Carol left. Time, with its own steps, has soothed the pain and transformed longing into a silent presence. The house that was once a space for reconstruction had become a complete home. Isabel and Michael got married late in the afternoon, in a small ceremony in the backyard, surrounded by friends from the clinic, neighbors and former patients. There was no princess dress or luxurious salon, but there were promises spoken with truth, hands firmly clasped, and a picture of Carol on the table with fresh flowers next to it. It was the kind of wedding that didn't impress social media, but that moved everyone present. Isabel's pregnancy came months later. It was unplanned, but it was greeted with a mix of joy, shock, and tears. Michael was speechless when he saw the positive test, then laughed for long minutes and hugged her so tightly that she could barely breathe. "We're having a girl," he said with conviction. And they were right. Over the next few months, the house filled with tiny clothes, storybooks, and plans whispered at night, when Isabel would lean her belly against his back and say, "She's going to have the best of what we are together." Michael would reply, "And the best of what came before us, too." And then, with calm hearts, they would complete the silence with a kiss. On the day of her birth, Michael held his daughter in his arms, as if he were holding the whole world. Her eyes were slightly slanted, her fingers long, and she was crying the most beautiful cry he had ever heard. Isabel, exhausted, smiled with tears in her eyes. "She's perfect," she whispered. Michael nodded, holding his voice. "We'll call her Carol," he said, "for everything she left us, for everything we've become because of her." Isabel reached out and caressed her husband's face, "and because now she's still here." In the background, in the hospital room, light came in softly through the window. It was as if the world, for a moment, had stopped to witness what love can build after pain. Years later, when little Carol ran barefoot through the yard, her hair blowing in the wind and her laughter free, Isabel and Michael looked at each other as if they already knew everything they had lived, everything they had lost, everything they had learned. It was there, running among flowers and laughter. Life had not always been fair, but it had been generous. And now, in their daughter's small hands, in the stories told before bed, and in the portrait of the old lady on the bookshelf, it all made sense. Because in the end, it wasn't about a happy ending. It was about permanence, about roots that remain, and about the kind of love that even after everything is over, still chooses to stay. If you like this story, subscribe to the channel, leave a like and activate notifications so you don't miss future content. Come on!